Under the thunderous roar of 50,000 fans, the stadium seemed to vibrate like a living heartbeat. Bright spotlights cut through drifting smoke as Michael Jackson moved across the stage, every eye following his iconic silhouette. Then, in an instant that felt unscripted and electric, he paused mid-step and looked toward the front rows. The band held a lingering note, and the deafening crowd began to quiet, sensing something extraordinary. Michael's gaze locked on a small figure, a little girl holding a handmade sign that shimmered in the lights. Without saying a word, he crouched down and reached out, signaling to security with a subtle gesture. The massive crowd rippled as guards carefully parted fans to guide the child forward. The cameras swung toward her as she was lifted above the sea of waving arms, and a hush spread across the arena, the kind that makes 50,000 people sound suddenly weightless. She wore a soft pink jacket, her tiny shoes catching the glow of the stage as she stepped into the spotlight. For a performer renowned for precision and elaborate choreography, this was different, completely spontaneous, a moment no one could have scripted. Michael extended his gloved hand and offered a gentle smile, his body language calm and open, as if the music and spectacle no longer mattered. The crowd leaned forward, breathless, realizing they were witnessing something intimate and rare, a superstar setting aside the show for a single child. The silence was so pure it almost rang in the air, broken only by the distant hum of the sound system. Camera flashes sparked like faint lightning as Michael drew her closer, his face softening with unmistakable warmth. It was as if the enormity of the concert had dissolved, leaving only a quiet connection between an artist and a young fan. No one knew yet what she would say or why this moment would echo for decades, but everyone could feel that it carried weight. In that suspended heartbeat of time, the king of pop and a little girl stood center stage, and the biggest show on earth suddenly felt smaller than a whisper, setting the scene for words powerful enough to bring Michael Jackson himself to tears. The night's magic becomes even clearer once you understand the backdrop of this extraordinary moment. It was 1997, during Michael Jackson's History World Tour, one of the largest and most ambitious concert series of the decade. The venue that evening was a massive open-air stadium packed with 50,000 fans, each one buzzing with the kind of excitement only the king of pop could inspire. Tickets had sold out in record time, and the atmosphere before the show was a mix of anticipation and pure adrenaline. Giant video screens framed the stage, lasers sliced through a haze of stage smoke, and the opening acts had already whipped the audience into a frenzy long before Michael even appeared. By the time he stepped out in his iconic military-style jacket and single white glove, the energy was electric, almost overwhelming. People of every age and background were united by the same thrill. They were about to witness a performance from the most famous entertainer in the world. But Michael's concerts were never just about singing and dancing. He was known for moments of deep connection with his audience, whether it was pausing to talk about world peace, inviting fans to sing along, or simply sharing a smile that reached the back rows. That evening was no exception. From the first note of Jam to the heartfelt lyrics of Heal the World, he moved with a magnetic presence that kept the crowd on its feet. Stadium lights pulsed with each beat, fans waved homemade banners, and the ground trembled under synchronized clapping. Still, amid all the grand spectacle, there was a softer side to Michael that longtime fans recognized, a man who genuinely cared about children and their struggles, who quietly supported over 30 charities focused on kids' health and well-being. He often spoke about how children reminded him of innocence and hope, and he had a habit of reaching out to them during concerts, whether to offer a hug, a handshake, or just a moment of attention. That history made what was about to happen feel both surprising and somehow perfectly in character. This wasn't just another night of flawless choreography and chart-topping hits, it was an evening where Michael's compassion would eclipse the performance itself. As the show built toward its emotional centerpiece, Heal the World, the audience sensed a shift. The music softened, the lights dimmed to a warm glow, and the entire stadium seemed to take a collective breath. No one in that crowd of 50,000 could have predicted that a single child's presence would soon steal the spotlight and create a memory powerful enough to outshine every song on the set list, but the stage was perfectly set for something unforgettable. As the final notes of Heal the World floated through the warm night air, the crowd swayed in unison, their voices blending with the music like a giant choir. Then, just as the last chorus faded, Michael's movements slowed. Instead of striking the next dance cue, he stepped forward to the very edge of the stage, scanning the audience with a searching gaze. The enormous screens captured his face in close-up, revealing a sudden stillness, almost as if he was listening for something beyond the music. The stadium lights dimmed to a soft blue wash, and the only sounds were the rustling of flags and the distant echo of fans calling his name. People who had been dancing moments earlier stopped mid-motion, sensing an unexpected change in the air. Michael shaded his eyes with his gloved hand and pointed toward the front rows, his gesture deliberate and precise. A wave of excitement rippled through the crowd, thousands of heads turned, trying to see what had caught his attention. Security staff along the barricade immediately looked in the same direction, their earpieces crackling as they moved toward the spot he indicated. There, just behind the rail, stood a little girl no more than 7 or 8 years old, a bright pink jacket making her stand out against the sea of concert t-shirts and flashing glow sticks. She held a small handmade sign high above her head, the glitter catching the spotlight like tiny stars. For a brief moment she seemed frozen, eyes wide as she realized the king of pop was looking directly at her. Michael took a single step closer, then raised his hand in a gentle beckon. The music faded to near silence, broken only by a distant cheer from the upper tiers. The girl hesitated, glancing back at an adult beside her, before a security guard approached and crouched down to speak softly. The entire stadium seemed to lean forward, thousands of fans holding their breath as the guard nodded and lifted her carefully over the barrier. A hush settled over the crowd, the kind that somehow feels louder than noise, as she was escorted toward the stage. Michael remained perfectly still, his eyes following her every step, his expression tender and patient. Camera flashes flickered like distant lightning while the massive screens tracked her slow journey across the walkway. In those suspended seconds, the high-energy concert transformed into something intimate and fragile. Every beat of anticipation, every pause in the music, built a tension so thick you could almost touch it. What had been a spectacle of lights and sound was now a quiet, breathtaking moment where 50,000 people waited to see what would happen when a global superstar reached out to a single child. The crowd's collective breath seemed to hang in the cool night air as the small girl finally reached the edge of the stage. Security guards formed a careful path, and one of them lifted her up toward the glowing platform. The massive screens magnified the moment, showing her tiny hands gripping the guard's shoulders and the sparkle of her pink jacket catching the spotlights. Michael stepped forward, his posture soft and welcoming, and extended his famous gloved hand. As their palms met, a ripple of cheers swept across the stadium, but almost immediately the audience hushed again, as if unwilling to break the fragile magic unfolding. He knelt to her level, lowering his microphone so it wouldn't intimidate her, and gave a warm smile that melted the distance between superstar and child. The band, sensing the gravity of the scene, let the music fade to a gentle instrumental hum, almost like a heartbeat beneath the silence. Cameras flashed like distant stars, but on stage everything slowed, almost dreamlike. The girl's wide eyes reflected the bright stage lights, and for a moment she seemed weightless, hovering between awe and wonder. Michael brushed a stray curl from her face with a careful motion, his expression open and tender. Around them, 50,000 people stood completely still, even the usual rustle of fans and flags quieted as though the entire stadium had agreed to pause. He said something softly, just a few words of reassurance no microphone could catch, and she nodded, gripping his hand tighter. For a performer celebrated for flawless choreography and stadium-shaking vocals, Michael appeared utterly unconcerned with the spectacle. This was not about the show anymore. It was about a single connection, human and unguarded, played out before a sea of silent witnesses. The child shifted closer, her small shoes tapping gently against the stage floor, and Michael guided her with a gentle arm around her shoulder, almost protective. The cameras zoomed in tight, capturing every detail, the quiet smile on his face, the way she leaned in with shy trust, the glint of stage lights on his jeweled jacket. It was a moment that felt both impossibly grand and deeply personal, as if the massive concert had shrunk to a living room, where only the two of them existed. The anticipation built with each heartbeat, every person in that vast arena waiting to hear the first words the child might speak, aware that whatever came next could etch itself into music history forever. The entire stadium seemed to vanish into silence as Michael leaned closer, bringing his ear down to the little girl's level. The cameras tightened their focus, catching every flicker of expression on his face while the band held a soft, suspended chord beneath the hush. With one small step forward, the child cupped a hand near his ear and whispered words only he could hear. No microphone picked it up, but fans closest to the stage later recalled that she thanked him for helping her sister through a long illness, saying something along the lines of, "Your music makes her feel brave." Whether every detail of that sentence is exact or not, multiple first-hand accounts agree the message was unmistakably heartfelt. Michael froze for a beat, eyes widening as the meaning sank in. The hush across 50,000 people felt almost tangible, a shared breath waiting for his reaction. Slowly, his shoulders softened, and the faintest tremor crossed his face as his eyes began to glisten. He rested a hand gently on the girl's back, his other hand covering his mouth as if to steady himself. Witnesses say you could practically hear a pin drop, a surreal contrast to the deafening cheers of just minutes earlier. She whispered again, a few words no one else could fully catch, and he gave a small nod, as though promising something only the two of them would ever understand. From the wings, a security guard stepped forward, but Michael waved him off, holding the girl a moment longer. The giant screen showed his lips quivering, eyes shining under the bright stage lights. The crowd, sensing the raw intimacy of the exchange, stayed silent, some fans visibly wiping their own tears. For a man known worldwide for polished performances and precise choreography, this spontaneous exchange revealed an entirely different side, unrehearsed, vulnerable, profoundly human. When he finally straightened, Michael brought the microphone back to his lips, his voice thick with emotion as he said softly to the audience, This is why I sing." A swell of cheers erupted, but he remained focused on the child, brushing her cheek with the back of his glove before pulling her into a gentle embrace. In that single whisper, she had cut through all the spectacle, lasers, lights, and towering speakers, reminding everyone that behind the king of pop was a man whose music truly touched lives. It was a moment that needed no amplification, no grand gesture, a few quiet words from a small voice carried more power than the loudest chorus ever could. For a long moment Michael simply held her, the two of them framed by a soft glow of stage lights as the stadium remained almost eerily quiet. Then the audience's restraint broke into a gentle wave of cheers, rising and falling like distant thunder, but Michael didn't rush. He eased back just enough to look into the girl's eyes, his own glistening as a tear traced a faint line down his cheek. Without a word, he pulled her close again, rocking slightly as though the massive arena around them had disappeared. The band, sensing his unspoken cue, kept the music low and slow, letting the moment breathe. A camera flash illuminated his face for a split second, revealing an expression rarely seen from the king of pop, unguarded, tender, completely present. He finally lifted the microphone, his voice quiet and slightly shaky, and thanked the audience for sharing this beautiful reminder of why music matters. The crowd responded with a surge of applause and scattered shouts of "We love you, Michael," but he seemed almost unaware of the noise, still focused on the small figure in his arms. After a final, gentle hug, he whispered something to her, too soft for the microphones, before handing her carefully to a waiting security guard, his hand lingering for an extra beat as she was guided safely back down to the floor. The arena lights brightened a shade, and the first familiar chords of "You Are Not Alone" began to play, chosen not from the set list but from pure instinct. Fans near the stage later said they saw him wipe his eyes before lifting the mic again, delivering the opening lines with a depth of emotion that felt different from any rehearsal or recording. The crowd swayed and sang along, many openly weeping, their voices blending into a single, soothing chorus. From that point on, the concert carried a new energy, less like a high-powered pop spectacle and more like a shared celebration of love and connection. In interviews years later, attendees would recall how the atmosphere shifted, describing it as the most human moment of the entire tour. Michael's ability to command a stage was legendary, but this quiet vulnerability revealed a side of him that no choreography or pyrotechnics ever could. As the song reached its final refrain, he lifted his eyes to the night sky and smiled, a silent acknowledgement of the power one small child's words had to transform an entire stadium and, for a few unforgettable minutes, the heart of the world's greatest performer. As the final echoes of "You Are Not Alone" faded into the night, the stadium erupted in a standing ovation that felt less like routine applause and more like a collective thank you for what everyone had just witnessed. Fans hugged strangers beside them, many wiping tears, while the giant video screens replayed a slow-motion glimpse of Michael holding the little girl moments earlier. News outlets quickly picked up on the extraordinary scene. By the next morning, newspapers and TV segments around the world were highlighting it as the emotional centerpiece of the History World Tour. Headlines read things like "King of Pop stops show for a single whisper" and "A child's words move Michael Jackson to tears." Fan forums, yes, even in the dial-up era, buzzed with first-hand accounts. People who had been near the front shared their shaky camcorder footage, and others described the hush that swept through the crowd, comparing it to watching a miracle happen in real time. Some attendees even wrote letters to Michael's fan clubs saying that the quiet of that moment stayed with them more vividly than any song. Over the following weeks, international magazines printed still photographs of the embrace, many of them ending up as treasured posters on bedroom walls. Although the girl's identity remained private, a few credible fan reports suggested that her family later confirmed she simply wanted to thank Michael for giving her sick sister strength through his music. Whether every detail of that backstory can be perfectly verified or not, the emotional impact was undeniable. Commentators and fellow artists praised Michael for letting vulnerability take center stage, calling it a rare glimpse of the man behind the superstar. The concert itself became a landmark in pop culture memory. Bootleg recordings of that night were traded for years, and to this day clips circulate on social media, drawing millions of views and heartfelt comments. Even decades later, people who were there still describe it as the moment the show disappeared and humanity took over. For many, it reinforced what longtime fans already believed, that Michael's greatest gift wasn't just his voice or dance moves, but his ability to forge a profound, almost spiritual connection with an audience of thousands through a single, quiet act of compassion.